President-elect Ramon Magsaysay in 1953 held so much promise. With his country only 7 years out of the war, Filipinos felt that he was the leader who truly represented the masses and would direct the country's growth. He was young, his energy was boundless, and his commitment to serve the people was unquestionable.
I believe that the President should set the example of a big heart, an honest mind, sound instincts, the virtue of healthy impatience, and an abiding love for the common man.
Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute
Each
online
year,
lecture series.
millions of people around the world are being displaced by war, natural disasters, or scarcity of resources. They have literally lost their homes. Here is an ordinary man doing extraordinary things for the peoples of Southeast Asia, bringing about transformation in unusual ways. His organization, trusted by global funding agencies, has been active in providing much needed aid to refugees and the uprooted from Myanmar, the Philippines, Laos, Hong Kong, Cambodia, and Vietnam. These include psychosocial support, literacy and health services, and infrastructure building, among others. He has been doing so for more than 40 years. Stephen Muncy, through his greatness of spirit, has become not only an inspiration to others, but also a defining symbol of the triumph of will, of vision, and of heart to make Asia a better place for the common man. In doing so, he himself has redefined what home means. It's not four walls and a roof. It's where your heart is.
The Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute online lecture series featuring Dr. Stephen Muncy, a humanitarian and peace worker from Southeast Asia. Our 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee will begin shortly. We would like to remind the audience of the following. The video and audio functions of our audience will be disabled during the panel discussion. For questions, clarifications, and or comments, we encourage everyone to use the Q&A tab and the chat room in the Zoom webinar. We will try to address as many relevant questions and comments during the session. Please be always respectful in the chat room and the Q&A tab. We invite everyone to follow the Ramon Magsaysay Award on social media. You may find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We are also inviting you to visit our brand new website at www.rmaward.asia for more information on the Ramon Magsaysay Award and this year's laureates. We would like to welcome our friends from the deaf community. We are providing a sign language interpreter for our audience. This is part of our continuing effort to be more inclusive. This lecture is made possible through the cooperation of Community and Family Services International, CFSI. It is the organization founded by Dr. Stephen Muncy. To learn more about CFSI and the wonderful work that they do, please watch this short video. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute online lecture series featuring 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Southeast Asia, Dr. Stephen Muncy, a humanitarian and peace worker working in disaster and conflict areas in Asia. Steve will be sharing with us his brave journey in rebuilding lives and forging partnerships for humanity, development, and peace. Immediately after the lecture presentation, we will have a reaction from our invited panelists, all of whom are experienced peace and humanitarian leaders in Asia. After the panel discussion, we will be opening the floor to questions from our audience. You may use the various available platforms on Zoom, on Facebook, and also on YouTube for your questions. To formally open this day's event, please all welcome to your grid the president of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, Ms. Susan B. Afan.
Thank you, Poch. And hello, good afternoon to everyone. The Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute's lecture series is the unique highlight of the Ramon Magsaysay Awards festival season. This is where the public is given an opportunity and access to our Ramon Magsaysay laureates, learning about the respective leadership journeys in their own words. We at the Foundation are very happy to have so many of you joining us today. Maraming salamat po. We would like to send our deepest appreciation as well to members of the Ramon Magsaysay Award family who are with us. We have members from our Board of Trustees, a handful of Ramon Magsaysay laureates, and even past members of our board, most notably Amina Rasul Bernardo, who will also serve as our moderator for the panel discussion later. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Since 1958, we at the Foundation have been identifying leaders who have demonstrated what we celebrate as greatness of spirit. In the past, we have given the Ramon Magsaysay Award to Richard Dick. This was back in 1958. Of course, there's been quite a few other Americans since then. But he was an American publisher who championed press freedom in the Philippines. In 1994, Jose Anzorena, an Argentinian missionary working in Japan, also received the Ramon Magsaysay Award. And in 2002, Ruth Fao, a German nun serving the people of Pakistan. You see, Asia's Premier Prize is given not exclusively to Asians per se, but to courageous individuals who serve the peoples of Asia. Greatness of spirit, as we've come to realize, is truly not just selfless, but it is borderless. This year, the Ramon Magsaysay is again being bestowed to someone who at this point is probably more Asian than most of us. He has spent over 40 years working in high-risk conflict and disaster areas, devoting his life to rebuilding individual lives, families, and communities. In 1980, he worked as a volunteer in the Philippine Refugee Processing Center in Morong, Bataan, which was a transit center for Indo-Chinese refugees of the Vietnam War. Seeing the lack of psychosocial services in the camp, he founded a non-governmental organization to address this need. This organization later evolved to Community and Family Services International, known as CFSI, in 1989. CFSI was tasked by the United Nations Higher Commission for Refugees to do similar work in the Vietnamese refugees camps in Hong Kong in 1989 up to 1993. CFSI is a humanitarian organization committed to the lives, well-being, and dignity of people uprooted by persecution, armed conflict, disasters, and other exceptionally difficult circumstances. The organization has assisted refugees from 48 countries and territories. This afternoon, we will get to know more about the work of this wonderful, great organization from its founder, Dr. Muncy. In 2021, Stephen Muncy, for his exceptional service to humanity, was elected to receive the Ramon Magsaysay Award, Asia's premier prize and highest honor. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce a man who is redefining the meaning of selfless service to humanity, Dr. Stephen Muncy. Steve, good afternoon, and welcome to your lecture.
Good afternoon, Suzanne, and thank you for those very kind words.
Well, you know what, Steve, I think that ever since I called you that day to tell you that you won the award, you and I have become friends. And the more I am even exposed to the work that you do, I am even more sure that the Board of Trustees of the Foundation have really found a person that really, exemplifies what this foundation is all about. So it is truly our honor to greet you this afternoon and to be able to listen to what you have to say to all of us.
Thank you, Susan, and I hope you feel that way after my lecture. Who knows, you may be disappointed.
Hey, or I might feel even more, right? More involved, and I'm going to be Miss Rara for you and CFSI.
Fantastic.
So let's get down to business, because I know that not only do we want to listen to Steve's lecture, but we also want to do a discussion thereafter. So to minimize the technological glitches, we have requested Stephen to pre-record his public lecture. After the video, he will rejoin us for a question and answer portion. So may we now request everyone to please turn off their cameras and microphones as well during the lecture video. So my dear team that's working behind the scenes, let's go put on Steve's lecture.
Greetings of peace, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you about Rebuilding Lives, Partnerships for Humanity, Development, and Peace. We, including some special guests, will focus on efforts to foster the social fabric that enables individuals, families, and communities to recover from armed conflict. I am deeply grateful to the Board of Trustees of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, or the RMAF, for naming me as the 2021 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Southeast Asia. In so doing, the RMAF is honoring the organization I have long been privileged to serve, Community and Family Services International, or CFSI, which is now celebrating its 40th anniversary year. This award is for we, not just me, specifically the people of CFSI, meaning the board, staff, and community volunteers. Virtually all are locally recruited, and most have themselves experienced discrimination, persecution, conflict, violence, and/or forced displacement. CFSI was created by volunteers at the Philippine Refugee Processing Center in 1981, largely as a response to man's inhumanity to humankind. War, armed conflict, torture, sexual violence, deprivation, and other profound violations of human rights, all meant to badly damage, if not destroy, the other, causing forced displacement and ripping apart families, communities, and societies. The people of CFSI believe every person is unique, with inherent dignity and worth, equal and inalienable rights, the need to be meaningfully connected to others, and the potential to contribute to the well-being of the human family. In short, rights, needs, and strengths. Our vision is diverse people living together in dignity, peace, and harmony. We see human dignity as sacred, important, and to be protected, more so in situations of armed conflict, often resulting in recurrent displacement. Our mission is to vigorously protect and promote human security, specifically the lives, well-being, and dignity of people uprooted by persecution, armed conflict, disasters, and other exceptionally difficult circumstances. We have two goals. Number one, empower and equip uprooted persons to address social and health problems. And number two, prevent children, women, and men from becoming uprooted by promoting peace, respect for human rights, and the equitable distribution of resources. Simply stated, the purpose of CFSI is rebuilding lives. The populations of greatest concern are refugees, internally displaced persons, stateless persons, and those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, and in need of social protection. Let's take a moment for definitions. A refugee is someone who's fled his or her country, meaning they have crossed an international border because of an exceptionally difficult circumstance, such as war, violence, conflict, or persecution. Outside their country, they're unable or unwilling to return because of a well-founded fear of persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Refugees are protected in international law, largely through the 1951 Convention on Refugees and the related 1967 Protocol. Internally displaced persons, or IDPs, may have experienced the same or similar situations as refugees and/or disasters and the adverse impact of climate change. But they have not crossed an international border. Instead, they remain in their own country. IDPs are not presently afforded international protection, although many countries do try to apply international standards, including the guiding principles on internal displacement endorsed by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in 1998. Stateless persons are those not considered a national or citizen under the laws of any country. Many have been forcibly displaced. Others have remained where they and their ancestors have always lived, but they are highly vulnerable and often excluded from or unable to access basic public services. They are especially vulnerable when their births have not been officially registered and their life histories are not recognized. Note that refugees or IDPs may also be stateless persons. The needs of these three populations, plus others, has CFSI working in three distinct but related arenas: humanitarian, development, and peace building. Our interventions are tailored to the local, national, or regional context and informed by the nature and scale of the situation of concern, as well as the availability of resources. For example, CFSI has helped protect and assist refugees from 48 countries, beginning with refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos and the Philippines in 1981, and expanding to Hong Kong in 1989. We have worked with families and communities displaced by sudden onset disasters, such as typhoons and earthquakes, in all three major island groupings in the Philippines, as well as in Myanmar and Papua New Guinea. Sadly, we anticipate many people will be adversely affected by calamities and climate change in the years ahead, more so if a range of actions are not taken with immediate effect. Since 1998, CFSI has been working with stateless persons in Rakhine State, Myanmar. In more recent times, helping to prevent the Sama Bajau of the Philippines from becoming stateless. We have worked in peace building in Timor-Leste, and with people affected by armed conflict or violence within their own countries as well as across borders in Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines, especially Mindanao, where we have served continuously since 2000. These situations have largely been driven by injustice and have resulted in many lost lives, large-scale displacements, and low scores on most human and social development indicators. You know, one of the defining characteristics of all such CFSI activity is partnership with many stakeholders. These include the affected population, government at various levels, UN agencies, development partners, non-governmental organizations or NGOs, civil society organizations, the private sector, donors, and many others. We purposefully develop and sustain such relationships to underscore the importance of inclusion and to build community for social transformation. From the perspective of CFSI, the most important of these wonderful partners are the affected persons, families, and communities. They are, in fact, the reason CFSI exists. Lesson number 1, the we includes not only the people of CFSI, but also the partners of CFSI. Humanitarian assistance is usually a response to some major emergency, such as a devastating typhoon, or a highly complex situation like an outbreak of armed conflict. These situations result in a great deal of loss. They displace large numbers of people, involve significant damage to both public and private infrastructure, and they require immediate intervention. In such situations, humanitarian activities are directed towards saving lives, alleviating suffering, strengthening resiliency, and promoting recovery. Generally, humanitarian actors exit the area after the situation has improved, if not normalized. Work in the development arena is generally focused on those in need of social protection, such as the poor, disadvantaged and vulnerable people, out-of-school youth, persons with disabilities and chronic health conditions, indigenous peoples, and others. Development efforts are generally community-driven, usually take place in rather stable environments, and are often programmed over a relatively long period of time. Typically, the aim is greater opportunity and an improved quality of life. Because this takes quite a while, development actors may remain in the same area for many years, even decades. Peace building involves a range of activities, including advocacy, fostering dialogue and relationships, finding ways to resolve differences and pursue transitional justice, violence prevention, reforming institutions, and promoting societal transformations. Interventions can take place at the highest levels, at the household level, or just about anywhere in between. They can include formal negotiations between warring parties leading to lasting peace agreements, as well as reconciliation ceremonies ending violence between families or clans. While it is possible for those who serve in each of these three arenas to essentially work in silos, there is growing realization and appreciation for what is known as the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus, or the Triple Nexus. From the CFSI perspective, this is a useful framework for interventions with individuals, families, and communities affected by armed conflict, one that we have been applying in Mindanao and beginning more recently, Rakhine State, Myanmar. At a future date, we hope to speak about the rapidly evolving situation in Myanmar and our efforts to ramp up our response. Armed conflict, whatever the cause, results in death, physical and psychological suffering, the destruction of property, delayed social, economic, and human development, displacement, and for many, a loss of hope for the future. It produces IDPs, leaves stateless persons even more vulnerable, and can force some people to seek asylum as refugees in other countries. Perhaps most damaging of all is the loss of trust between peoples and between people and other stakeholders. The Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus framework recognizes that the journey from conflict to development and peace is seldom smooth and linear, requires greater cooperation as well as collaboration across sectors and between all the concerned stakeholders, and is most likely to succeed when local actors are not only actively participating, but also playing some of the major roles. It is, after all, those who live in the area who are most adversely affected by armed conflict and displacement, just as it is they who are most expected to benefit from increased access to newly developed services, infrastructure, and goods. This does not mean there is no longer any need for support from national or international actors, nor any major roles for them to play. We do not believe that, and we do not say that. But from our perspective, the Nexus does require a new mindset. It calls for more bottom-up thinking and demands more people at the table, particularly local stakeholders. The Nexus framework also allows for greater flexibility in terms of responses to rapid changes in the environment. Further, it underscores the importance of true and lasting partnerships, relationships, not simply project-specific cooperation and collaboration. In other words, the Nexus calls us to listen, and listen well, to those most affected, which is absolutely essential for trust building. Lesson number 2, listen, listen, listen. To give us an idea what this might look like in areas affected by armed conflict, we traveled back to Mindanao in October, this time with cameras, and consulted our local partners. These included IDPs from the most affected area of Marawi City, which suffered from 5 months of intense armed conflict in 2017. It also involved consulting those helping to rebuild Marawi. We consulted individuals, families, and communities in the 6 major camps of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or the MILF, which has entered into a comprehensive peace agreement with the government of the Philippines, or the GPH, after more than 40 years of conflict. We spoke with combatants, transitioning combatants, and former combatants, as well as representatives of local, regional, and national government. Let's hear what these folks had to say about partnerships to foster the social fabric for humanity, development, and peace.
Napakasakit sa amin na makita yung mga houses namin na binobombahan. Na hindi namin matanggap na yung mga nakikita namin sa TV is naranasan namin as an IDP.
When I came back from Saudi Arabia, we put a business here. The water refilling station is already installed in there, okay, and then ready to operate, but then the seeds.
Oh my goodness.
You can see the house of my mom and my dad. So my dream that we come back again, then with my family. I hope so, inshallah.
For me, it's not a dream of mine, but it's a dream of most Marna who are affected by the Marawi crisis. We only want one goal and one dream is for us to go back.
I asked them, are you in to serve others? They say, yes, ma'am, in whatever capacity we can.
Nakaka-extend kami ng help sa kapwa naming IDPs through CFSI.
Civil documentation given to IDPs of Marawi. It gave them more opportunity because we know it's the first legal proof of identity of every child.
Actually, every time we call the leaders of the shelter, and I would ask them what's the project or what's the project that really made a big impact on themselves.
We acknowledged early on that the government could not do everything and we really need a partner. We were able to build a nice relationship. A good example of how an NGO or a non-government organization works hand-in-hand in government. We are able to address the needs of the IDPs, which is the more important aspect that we have to do.
Sir, we believe and firmly believe that you are always with us to support the problem of the Bangsamoro, especially the people who are being a victim of historical injustice.
Saya na ano niya ko masir kami project, may kagtupier kami kagtutaw, kaya sa pagani na di kami mga pasay na kasi mato na anak tutunan namin apir ito. Nakumanan po kami katawan. Ito kay paguro ko. Kaya ito kayo makapasay mag-iskwila.
Kasi karamihan sa amin mga IP, puro forma, hindi makaperma. Pero ngayon kusang loob na humahabol ang paaralan sa amin. Kaya nagpapasalamat talaga ako sa inyo.
Na mabiyahe niya ang pinatili. Kapag kapangagis yung mga matuwa, nasabot yung mga dahil kapangagis sa Ingles, na abyan yan, bumagaga, ikapilumanin ka ng mga nganin, na pagsukusok ko yun. Na abyan yan, bumagaga, makatutay sa rin, mataling utang pa rin. Na alhamdulillah, magkakatokay.
Ang pangarap ko po ay makapagtapos ng pag-aaral para po ako makakuha ng trabaho. Teacher po.
Mapunamin niya si Bapak Wasiran niya, pagsukusukulan ko ka, napagitungil niya. Masahin niya tabang sa kami. Kaso, meto katulog ko to no na, susu kami na angga sa kinapangagi, sa naangga ka no kinamuna, kinapag-istrat, na namakatalo sa amin sa maya. Yako kahana sa ginawa ko na malilipin pa, mabe kapaguya-guya, mabe kapagagama na natuba.
In the camps, our targets are the combatants who are left behind for how many years. Yeah. So they are very thankful to our programs in the camps.
Kasi without them, we cannot imagine how successful this camp has been developed.
Unang nakikita namin is really in support dito sa peace process ng between GPH, of course, ng MILF.
We have now the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, the fruits of our bitter sacrifices, the fruits of our blood and tears, and of course we cannot have this without the assistance of other stakeholders, both local, national, and international.
Powerful. Thank you for listening to these local stakeholders, our brothers and sisters in the family that is humanity. I am sure you will agree with me. There is nothing I can say that will be more eloquent or impactful than what we just heard from them. There is, however, one more aspect of the work of CFSI that we wish to bring to your attention. That is capacity strengthening, specifically social work education. We speak of strengthening rather than capacity building because the latter seems to suggest there is no capacity, and we know, in fact, there is a great deal of capacity. That said, we are also of the view that lifelong learning is essential and that it is our obligation as an organization to make that possible for our board, staff, community volunteers, as well as our partners. Lesson number 3. Learn and then learn some more. Early on, we learned that social workers in Southeast Asia have major roles to play in humanitarian action, development, and peace building. One of their many responsibilities is to help restore or weave together the social fabric that enables people to recover from a variety of exceptionally difficult circumstances, including in some parts of Southeast Asia, armed conflict. We also came to understand that the roles and responsibilities these helping professionals were and are expected to fulfill require higher level knowledge and skills, generally developed through a master's degree program in social work and several years of experience. Unfortunately, most of these social workers have only been able to complete a bachelor's degree in social work with little prospect of higher education in the field. Usually this is because there's no graduate degree program in their area and/or significant personal resource constraints. Further, some are living in areas affected by recurrent armed conflict, which makes it difficult to travel long distances from home for any purposes, including higher education. As such, we put on our innovation caps and work with partners, local, national, and international, to establish social work education projects in 3 locations, specifically the conflict-affected area of Mindanao, Vietnam, and Myanmar. In other words, we came up with models that allowed us to bring graduate degree level social work education to the places where it was most needed, thereby allowing these social workers to continue serving in their communities and their offices right where they were so desperately needed and at no cost to these same individuals. This initiative, known as the Social Work Education Project, or SWEP, has thus far resulted in 100 social workers in the conflict-affected area of Mindanao earning a master's degree in social work, as well as 203 individuals earning the same degree through a different partnership model in Vietnam. The work in Myanmar has progressed, but not quite as quickly as we had hoped, owing to recent developments above and beyond the pandemic. In addition to the master's program, we've been able to sponsor 6 persons from 3 countries to undertake doctoral programs in social work or social development. We want to do much more in social work education, but first, what is the impact of SWEP? What difference did it make? Let's go back to Mindanao to find out.
The SWEP program actually helped me a lot in terms of my professional growth and development. It gives me a lot of opportunity to learn and relearn things about peace building, humanitarian action, and of course, working with children, specifically those in conflict-affected communities.
I believe that I was empowered to empower the future social workers. For the last 10 years, I've been in the academe, and I believe that these students graduated from our university are now working with conflict-affected areas and fragile areas.
Most we are both in the development work, in the humanitarian setting. We have also cohort which is in medical setting, in the academe, and with the government agencies and the United Nations organization. So we are now spread over, and we are all providing services or delivering intervention in conflict-affected areas. That's our commitment. So I am calling for a collaborative efforts with all of the partners. The people of Mindanao really want peace. But in meeting that vision of having a peaceful community, we need everybody to work on it.
Thank you, Narida, for encouraging us all to work together towards peace. So, my brothers and sisters, what are the takeaways from this discussion of partnerships for humanity, development, and peace? From my perspective, 3 simple words. We listen, learn. Thank you.
Steve, that was awesome. Steve, thank you so much for such an inspiring and thought-provoking lecture this afternoon. I mean, I couldn't help it. There were times, when I was listening that I was in awe of all the things that you and CFSI have done over the course of 40 years. But at the same time, there were moments when I was sighing and I was shaking my head, because although you've done so much, there is still so much more that needs to be done. Absolutely. So, and hopefully after today's lecture and discussion, we can bring in more people into the dialogue, the conversation, and more importantly, in the listening and the acting and the learning, so we can move your advocacy forward. Before I turn the floor to our moderator, I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of 3 of our esteemed Board of Trustees. That's our chairman, Mr. Aurelio Montinola, who is listening to us this afternoon. Of course, Emily Abrera and Dr. Shell Habito. We also have with us Ramon Magsaysay Awardee Ernesto Domingo. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, I need to turn my square actually to the moderator of this afternoon session, Amina Rasul Bernardo, who was the past vice chair of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation Board of Trustees. And she was also the president of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. She's a member of the Board of Regents of the Mindanao State University. As one of the 3 Philippine representatives to the ASEAN Women for Peace Registry in 2018, she's one of the leading Muslim leaders in the Philippines working to strengthen peace and development, as well as promote human rights, justice, and democratic practices in Muslim Mindanao. She was a member of the Philippine cabinet under the former president, Fidel V. Ramos, serving as presidential advisor as well on youth affairs, and appointed concurrently as the first chair of the National Youth Commission, which she organized. In 2007, she received the Muslim Democrat of the Year award from the Washington, D.C.-based Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy. And in 2019, she was also the recipient of the United Nations Peace Award. Today, she hosts She Talks Peace, a very popular podcast on peace and women issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is another big honor of mine and privilege to introduce to you our moderator this afternoon, Miss Amina Rasul Bernardo. Hello, Amina.
Hi. Thank you so much, Susan, for that very gracious introduction. And hello, Steve. Good to see
Hi,
you
Amina.
looking so handsome. For our panel discussion this afternoon, we promise all of you a very thoughtful discussion, as we have invited individuals who are also doing development and peace work like Steve in various parts of Asia. First, let me introduce to you 2002 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee from Myanmar. And she is none other than Dr. Cynthia Maung. She provides primary health care for the most marginalized migrants and displaced people on the Thai-Myanmar border in coordination with other community-based organizations, local NGOs, and stakeholders. She and her team have worked tirelessly for over 30 years in response to the emerging needs of healthcare, education, and protection for the internally displaced and migrant workers. During Myanmar's pro-democracy movement, she was among those who fled when the military seized power in September 1988. She and 14 of her colleagues traveled through forests and remote villages, treating locals suffering from disease and injury with the limited supplies they carried. She and her colleagues founded the Mai Tao Clinic in November 1989. They provided care to patients who suffered from war injuries, malaria, and mental health with such limited resources that they had brought with them and acquired from the local community. Despite facing restrictions from both the Thai and Myanmar governments, the clinic continued and survived over the years. Dr. Maung courageously went on to establish a school, orphanages, and safe houses along the borders. Joining Dr. Maung is Ayi Hernandez, a peace and development worker from Mindanao. Ayi's strong commitment to peace and development work is generated from his exposure and continued understanding of the root causes of war and conflicts in Mindanao, enriched throughout his career. The 4 organizations he founded under the Balay Mindanao Group in 2006 are living testament to his commitment to contribute significantly to peace and prosperity for Mindanao. He was awarded the Bayanihan Civilian Award of the Armed Forces of the Philippines in 2016 and has been an Eisenhower Fellow since 2017. He currently serves as a senior advisor to the Office of the Presidential Advisor for Peace, Unity, and Reconciliation. He is also a member of the government's implementing panel for the Moro Islamic Liberation Force Peace Agreement. Front. He is also the head secretariat of the National Task Force for the Disbandment of Private Armed Groups. May I now give the floor to Dr. Cynthia Maung for her reactions.
Good afternoon, the Board of Trustees and staff member of Magsaysay Foundation, and distinguished and colleagues, and Mr. Stephen Muncy. Thank you very much for having opportunity to give feedback. Today, I take a great pride in to be invited to be a panelist for Dr. Stephen Muncy's lecture. Stephen Muncy's work still reminds us that our fight for protecting human rights of our communities, especially the most vulnerable, is still needed focused effort. 30 years ago, I myself was displaced from home after fleeing from repressive regime in Myanmar. Since the beginning of my journey to the neighboring countries, Thailand, I witnessed the visible suffering of the people from malaria, malnutrition, and war casualties along the way. The rates of maternal mortality is high due to poor access to health services. Other invisible suffering were fear, insecurity, uncertainty, and sadness derived from separation from home, lands, and family. In the early months of 2021 in Myanmar, atrocity and violences committed by State Administrative Council following the coup had displaced many people, including civil servants from the city, as well as civilians from the rural communities. The health workers were the first group of people that joined the resistance against the coup, and many of them were faced with violence repression by the State Administrative Council. Many of them had fled the atrocity and joined the ethnic health workers to provide life-saving care to the fellow displaced community and the ethnic communities. We can see that diversity was an excuse for discrimination, prejudice, and atrocity committed. Building resilience means promoting understanding and respect for our neighbors, and the human rights for each one in our community is ensured by each of us, which involve rights to security, including health, food, and sense of being safe in our own home and community. From a small ethnic village to a periphery of Myanmar, to a community of slum house in the heart of Bengal or Manila, to the round table of ASEAN leaders, we all are obliged to talk about ensuring a dignified livelihood, a safe and healthy childhood, and an enabling environment for youth and women participation in community development amongst the human rights that we all are entitled to as a responsibility of a community as a whole. In every roundtable talk, policy paper, government scheme, humanitarian projects, and the public consultation, we must ensure that the realization of human rights for everyone is inclusive. In working towards a more just and peace society, we cannot compromise the rights of any single person, especially communities that are systematically left out due to their religion, ethnicities, and their legal status, and for many other reasons. Decades of our work and humanitarian response and rebuilding communities show that we cannot act alone despite our commitment and dedication. It should be a collective effort of individuals and organizations working toward the same cause. Our journey showed that building strong human center and inclusive institution and humanitarian communities that consist of organizations and agencies from diverse background help immensely in promoting human rights and empowerment of communities. In this challenging time of the double crisis, COVID-19 and the coup in Myanmar, the ASEAN community and the world's solidarity with the Myanmar people's fight for the road towards genuine freedom, democracy, and human rights is more important than ever. Impunity and injustice should be recognized as they are, and we all must condemn it openly and join forces to fight it, not just for the sake of fighting, but for the sake of our community, and more importantly for our humanity, and the pathway to the genuine peace and security for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. It's clear that it's not only us in Mindanao who have our share of problems. Myanmar is a terrible situation indeed. Now, let us all welcome Ayi Hernandez for his reaction. Hello, Ayi. Ayi, you're muted.
Hi, Amina. Magandang hapon. It's good to be here. It's my second time. I was first invited by Ramon Magsaysay during the Awardee award was given to Ambassador Awardee at the time. So it's good to be back. And good afternoon, everyone. For our participants and partners in the Muslim faith, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me first convey my greetings to the Ramon Magsaysay Awards board and staff, whom some of you have been a friend of mine. I'm very happy to know that Shell Habito is here. Hi, Shell. Also, a very warm congratulatory message to CSFI board and staff. I know some of them, of course, Steve and Noraida, I saw in the video, who's my colleague also in the Atlantic Fellowship. So magandang hapon po sa ating lahat, and let me put a context and frame in how I will deliver my reaction to a very substantial and very meaningful sharing of Steve. I would like to say that I will be sharing by wearing three hats. Number one, the hat of an NGO worker for 30 years. So this morning, I was sharing to a group of youth leaders, sharing my leadership journey, and then I didn't realize, Amina, that I'm already 30 years old in peace and development work, becoming old, no, each day. So, secondly, I will also be sharing, wearing the hat of a peace builder inside government. No, as introduced, I am now a senior advisor to Secretary Galvez and part of the panel and the chair of Joint Normalization Committee in the MILF GPH Peace Agreement. And lastly, I will also be sharing as a student of leadership and a student of management. Over the years, I've also have some very, shall we say, deep reflections on my 30 years of development work. As an NGO worker, first of all, I cannot say anything more with how Steve shared the progress of what they have achieved since 1989. No, and this is there are only two things that I would like to share in this context, Amina. Number one, of course, Amina knows this very well, and also Dr. Cynthia. But for the wider audience, if you are in the development work, you cannot afford to lose resources. No, you cannot even afford to be relaxed with your resources. You have to be very conscious about maximization of resources. And because resources for NGOs are very limited, so if you have a very limited resource, you have to have a very superior strategy. And part of that is really how do you maximize the resources that is being entrusted under your care, no? And that's the first point that I want to raise. And I'd like to say that CSFI has done a superb job in that context. And because of that, CSFI is still very, very much alive and very, very much, shall I say, very vibrant as an organization. And it cannot happen if the whole issue of performance, the whole issue of track record, and the whole issue of credibility is not very well strengthened over the years with CFSI and, of course, Steve as their leader. No, it's all about performance. If you are in the NGO work and you are very lousy, I don't think you will be given another chance to get the funding, right, Amina? If you don't have a very strong track record, which I've been doing also in my 25 years or 30 years of development work, nobody will pitch in, nobody will trust you, no? Right. And of course, the credibility and alongside the word of integrity. And I think CFSI has all this kind of character. And again, very warm congratulations to Steve and his team. The second hat that I would like to share, because I have a chance to work with CSFI as part of the steering committee of the World Bank project, no, in developing the MILF camps under the peace agreement. So for being a GPH panel member, I've seen how World Bank trusted CSFI, CFSI. So, and by the way, for the whole public listening right now, if you are a partner of World Bank, you must be something. No, you must be bringing a lot of credentials for World Bank to trust you. The most difficult partner is a bank like World Bank, no? And I have to state that to be very clear, no? And in implementing this project, and I know there are a lot of projects being implemented by CSFI, is that very particular that I have to share here is that when you participate in implementing a peace agreement, be sure that you have a lot of technical expertise, you have a lot of guts, and you have a very high level of sophistication. Because to be a co-implementer of a peace agreement is an entirely difficult thing, no? As they say, peace negotiations is difficult, but implementing a peace agreement is complex. And with the awardee now, dealing with World Bank, dealing with Bangsamoro Development Authority, with dealing with the communities, that's a whole value chain of complex value chain. And I think I've even heard in the World Bank Project 1 that most of the engineers before of Steve were threatened by MILF commanders, no, having not being able to establish the trust. I mean, no, they cannot even enter the camp of Commander Bravo at the time. No, and very critical for everyone to know that this is not an easy task. No, I've been in the work with OPA for 3 years, but you know, establishing the trust with MILF commanders, front commanders for that matter, is not an easy play. Quite difficult, quite tedious, and a lot of the word patience is needed. I was waiting for Steve to mention that name, but I think it was all incorporated in the listening and learning. But you know, the patience of listening, my God, I mean, not easy, not easy. Very, very difficult, believe me. My two hands and feet is now fully anong tawag sa Tagalog niyan? Nakalubog, no? In the peace process. And I'll tell you, really, really difficult because of the complexity that is brought about by short time frames. And you cannot rush because of just implementing a project. You have to respect boundaries, you have to respect perspectives, you have to respect mechanisms. And somehow the group of Steve was able to handle this very well. And I would like to bring it into the table that, believe me, this work that they have done in the MILF camps, one of the things that they should be fully remembered is this one, no? Because this is not just humanitarian, it's already the nexus of development and peace. And when you're dealing with decommissioned combatants or active combatants, you have to have a very high degree of credibility to earn their trust. On my third point regarding that one, while CFSI is trusted by World Bank, they have to also simultaneously develop the capacity of local partners, Amina, no? And you know that when you're working this idea.
That's right.
We can be trusted, but what about the local partners? How would we be able to deliver it fast, like the way we do, no? Na medyo may sophistication na, medyo may technical expertise na. And these three things combined, superb, no? Superb, I think, for the awardee to have this one. Lastly, as my hat as a student of leadership and student of management, I was touched by Steve. I didn't know that he was a volunteer before, and I could relate myself well. I was a volunteer in 1991 with Archbishop Tony Ledesma's Year of Service program. And I think the volunteer year shapes your perspective and your devotion to some important matters deep into your heart, no? And I think that's where Steve is a very effective leader. Without that volunteer experience, he could not have done this kind of sustained commitment, no? The hardship, all this listening and everything, no? And I would be very happy to see how Steve would be able to, I know it is already in his mind, but how would be able to develop the second liners of his group, no? Because they say the dream will always outlive the dreamer, no? And the key there is how do you choose who's the next in line to be able to sustain the passion, to be able to sustain the dream. Lastly, I will leave this one. Amina, I think I'm very touched and I'm very emotional about the whole issue of listening. No, I cannot help, Amina, to be emotional because the capacity and the gift of listening is not a natural gift.
Yep.
No, it's so difficult to teach the capacity to learn and the capacity to listen, much as the capacity to learn. No, but listening is also a gift. Listening is also a gift. That's why not everyone knows how to listen. And I think I would end, Amina, by saying that how I wish we can have a brand of international, local, or national politics that knows how to listen. So things will change substantially, globally, in a national scale, or in a local level. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ayi. I agree with 99% of what you said. The only point I disagree with is when you said that you don't know how to listen and you have to learn how to listen. You have been a very good political leader, my dear friend Ayi, and you know how to listen, you and Steve both. So thank you, Ayi, for talking about how, even though it is important, it's very important, a peace agreement is really just a piece of paper if it cannot be implemented. And it can only be implemented if you have partners like Balay Mindanao, the House of Mindanao, and CFSI. And this is largely based on the trust given not just by the national government or the development partners, but the trust of the local community, and in this case in particular, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. With trust comes credibility, and then you can have the implementation of that piece of paper, very important piece of paper, known as a peace agreement. So thank you, Ayi. Now, I have also been asked to give some reactions for Steve. And Steve had said earlier that peace building involves a range of activities, from formal negotiations, which Ayi is very familiar with, advocacy, fostering dialogue, even within families, from the highest national levels to the household, or just about anywhere in between. And I agree 100%, 200% with Steve. At no other time has peace building become more critical than it is today, when we are dealing not just with local conflicts, but infiltration by violent extremism and, unfortunately, a rising trend towards authoritarianism in countries that have known to be bastions of democracy and human rights, which is why I completely support Steve's reiteration of the bottom-up approach, the empowerment of local stakeholders. Speaking as a Muslim, in our Holy Quran, part of Surah 13, chapter 13, says Allah will never change the condition of the people until they change it themselves. In other words, God helps those who help themselves. Thus, any reform, any initiative will never succeed if it is imposed from the outside. Steve, Cynthia, and I know this very well. Peace cannot be imposed. Democracy cannot be mandated. The people in the community must want it, and change must come from within. And therefore, we must empower critical stakeholders within the community, which Steve is doing. Let me just focus on two stakeholders that we need to empower: youth and women. Empowering youth is no-brainer. They are our future. You don't empower them, you're going to have a bleak future. It is the empowerment of women that has become a little bit more difficult these days, with rising disrespect, for instance, of women's rights. But we must remember that studies have shown that when women are engaged in peace building, the resulting peace or peace agreement is more just and more sustainable. Which is why my organization, the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, is part of a global campaign to stand with women peace builders. It's a campaign that has been initiated by the Women's Alliance for Security Leadership, and we want to encourage, promote, and support peace builders, particularly women. Susan mentioned She Talks Peace, our podcast. It is a platform for peace builders, particularly women, and to share just their experiences and encourage others to become peace builders themselves. We have had the pleasure and honor to have Steve as one of our guests. Note that 60% of our listeners are women, and around 50% are under 30 years of age. What's even more remarkable, 11% are teenagers. So young people teenagers do want to learn how they can help. The video of Steve's CFSI shows the power of education for the adults, particularly in Muslim Mindanao. Let me tell you, more than a third of the adults in Muslim Mindanao are illiterate. Zero literacy. My mother, former Senator Santanina Rasul, already saw this problem over 50 years ago and started Magbasa Kita, Let Us Read, which is an adult literacy program. And Steve noticed full well, it's easy to teach adults to become literate, but you must go to the community. So in 3 months, 10 hours a week, we can convert a zero literacy adult to functional literacy. And would you know, 80% of the women who have become our students, over 80% are women. And our students over the last 50 years have become more engaged in local affairs and, even more important, have become more engaged in helping their children do well in school. At the end of the day, if we are to make our communities resilient to the lure of extremism and undemocratic ideas and peaceful, change must come from within. And change agents like women and youth must be empowered, as CFSI is doing. So thank you, Steve, for all that you do, not just in Muslim Mindanao, but in the rest of Asia as well. So let us welcome back Dr. Stephen Muncy as we now proceed to the panel discussion. I think we have got 10 questions already, but first, something that will make Ayi very happy. You have got an admirer who agrees 100% with everything that you said. And her name is Helen. Now, let me go through the questions. This is for Steve. It's the question says, administrations in the Philippines change hands every 6 years. Because of this, projects and priorities also change every 6 years. How does CFSI ensure the continuity of its long-term projects in the Philippines despite this reality? This is from Patricia of the Philippines. And I think Ayi could also respond to that as well. So Steve?
Thank you, Amina. Well, it is true, administrations change, and that happens in most countries. And it is true also that priorities change. I think the way CFSI tries to keep focused and active and resourced is by focusing specifically on the needs of the affected communities. If you are thinking about how you help people recover from armed conflict, if you're thinking about how you help people learn to read and write, if you're thinking about how you enable young people to play a greater role in society, if you think about how you move towards peace amongst people, these are not short-term programs. These are not short-term initiatives. They transcend the change in administrations. The environment may become more complicated. Your partners may become a little bit different in terms of approach and attitude, but the needs remain the same, and therefore the interventions need to continue over a longer period of time.
Thank you, Steve. Ayi, you have a comment for that before I call
Yes,
on
our
young leaders?
I got a short addition to what Steve have already substantially shared. Priorities can change, but the key there is how you maintain partnerships. Partnerships, when it's being strengthened, even if priorities change, will still bear fruit for the communities. It's the relationship that matters, not the priorities.
That is absolutely correct. And now let me call a young leader, the Ramon Magsaysay Transformational Leadership Institute Next Gen Youth Leader, Dale Perez of Pamulaan Center for Indigenous Peoples Education. Dale, please give us your question. Is Dale on?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm in great awe being on the screen with this great people. and such an honor to be your youth reactor for this special learning event. On behalf of the indigenous youth sector, the indigenous peoples communities, and the first cohort of the next gen of Ramon Magsaysay Awards Foundation. Malingwod daw namong lahat. Good afternoon, everyone, from Bagobo, Klata. Again, congratulations, Sir Stephen, and thank you for your efforts, empathy, and commitment to saving, especially the children, families, and communities who are victims of injustices, who have been caught in the crossfires, displaced, and merely lost their identity, dignity, and lives. My name is Dale Osog Perez. I belong to the Bagobo Klata of Davao City, Philippines, and currently I am the program coordinator of Ilawan Incorporated, and one of our programs is the Pamulaan Center for Indigenous Peoples Education. I am focusing my energy on volunteer works, IP youth leadership, and the advancement of Indigenous people's education. Armed conflict, social injustices, militarization, and other challenges Sir Stephen, Ma'am Cynthia, and Sir Ayi have mentioned are among the pressing problems in the IP communities, which further resulted in not only displacement from the ancestral domain, but the death of our culture, not only the tangible ones, but more deeply the intangible, our values and our wisdom. We cannot practice and live out the cultures that have been protected and fought long and hard by our ancestors for a long time once we are out from our home, where our sacred spaces are, our ancestral domain. And yet the struggle continues. In reality, your work, Sir Stephen, and your team is not an easy task. It requires an amount of courage and boldness. We are dealing with trust that has been used in violence. There is a deep scar that is difficult to heal. Last week, we gathered IP youth leaders coming from Mindanao, especially from the Maguindanao areas, focusing our discussion on the promotion of peace, justice, and development by nurturing our cultural identity and promoting intercultural dialogue. Be, listen, and learn towards respect were also the key elements that the IP youth are trying to convey to everyone. And we are trying to strengthen our sense of identity in asserting our rights through intercultural dialogue towards attaining sustainable development to long-lasting peace and harmony. The youth have a huge role in this journey as peace builders and peace advocates. Truly, the we listen, learn of Sir Stephen is not new to every one of us. Thus, it has been emphasized over and over again, but most of the time, it has always been forgotten, especially in the context of pursuing development and humanitarian efforts with the IP communities. This is what I admired most of your work, sir. You have provided a space where we can raise our voices and plot down our aspirations and definition of what kind of development we want by ensuring a full participation. In your works, you are providing avenues where we can rebuild our lives again, grounded in our own agenda, recognizing our capacities and strength. For that, dakal na salamat, maraming salamat. Everyone seeks peace. Everyone loves to live in peace and with justice. We, the indigenous communities, will continue to assert our rights, to listen and learn for the attainment of peace in our lands. And the election is coming in the Philippines. Our different political views have polarized us. In reality, in promoting sustainable peace and development, we need great leaders who are with us, willing to listen and give avenue to learn from us. Now, this is my message to my fellow youth. There are still so much to work, to learn together. But before I end, I would like to ask Sir Stephen, how do you think young people can contribute to your work, especially the indigenous youth? Maraming salamat.
Steve?
I think you just contributed to our work. Your eloquent intervention, the work you and your community are doing, the future is bright because of you all and because of you in particular and the way you have shared today. People can contribute to the work of CFSI in a variety of ways. One is you can volunteer with us. 2, you can work with us. 3, you can tell other people about us. 4, you can donate. but I think the way you have responded this afternoon is the most powerful, because you've joined heart and hands to bring about a new world for all peoples. Fantastic response, really fantastic.
Thank you. There's a question here, it's a Philippine context, but I think Dr. Cynthia can also respond as well. And this is from Nonon Baang. And he says, we've been talking mostly about peace building. How about the prevention of no peace, power corruption, nor war to happen? He cites an example, the system failure here in our country, disillusionment about martial law. But I think this applies to Myanmar as well. So shall we do ladies first, Dr. Cynthia?
Yes, it is one of the most challenging things that we have been facing. We need good governance, and we need to ensure that our government and the stakeholder need to be accountable for all the peace and development work or humanitarian work they have been doing. So that's why the community empowerment and the community engagement is very essential part in all the steps we have doing for peace, humanitarian, and development work. Prevention of the conflicts can also started in the community, grassroots level, in the family or in the school, as well as while we are doing the volunteer work with organization. So we have to respect the diversity as well as listen to others and continue learning from others how to harmonize the community through building the relationship and the partnership. So this is also continuous learning process, and peace is not peace is also the thing, but we have been doing in different level of intervention. So thank you for this question as well.
Indeed, fragile, and peace is really fragile, isn't it, Steve? So what's your response to that? How do you prevent no peace, power corruption, or war?
Well, some people would say don't let men have positions of power in government.
I agree.
If you look around the world, it's most often men who are creating situations of unpeace. It's most often men who are causing conflict between people in different countries or between countries. So we need more women in leadership. I think Dr. Cynthia also was very spot on when saying we have to work in communities and families and build from the ground up a constituency for peace and a constituency that demands accountability from those in power. We have today been talking quite a bit about humanitarian and development and peace building. We haven't hit very hard the core problem, which is injustice. And that is something that is growing. It is not getting smaller. It's not becoming less problematic. It is a major issue around the world. Our heart goes out to the people of Myanmar at the moment, a very difficult time in the history of that beautiful country. We are speaking a lot today about Mindanao, but Myanmar is very much on the hearts and minds of all of us, I'm sure.
Thank you, Steve. Ai, how do you prevent no peace, corruption, or war?
I mean, you know, I have a very different point of view always with that difficult question. No? in every situation, however difficult, for every peace worker, there is always an opportunity to work hard.
Right.
Harder and smarter. So the more difficult, the more smarter peace builder should become. So I have been into places and I have been into situations. So all of these things I try to embrace and see how we can best intervene, see how can we best seize the opportunity to grow more, and of course mitigate the effects of what has been mentioned in the question. Maraming salamat.
But this problem is been generational, hasn't it? Here's a question from Kiao Lin Tin from Myanmar, and it's for Dr. Muncy, for Steve. In rebuilding lives of people affected by armed or social conflicts, what do you think of the role of professional social workers, especially at the community level? Please tell us what social workers can do for these people. Thank you.
Great question. Social workers can play many roles, and one of them is community organizing, particularly when people have been displaced, but also before any sort of situation that causes displacement. Social workers can help make sure the people in the community, the affected populations, have access to information and know how to avail of services that might be available. Social workers can organize communities to speak up and to advocate for a change in their situation or for new approaches. Social workers can and should be training others to empower others. I liked what one of the social work professors said in our video. She had been empowered to empower others. Social workers can also play roles with people who have been traumatized by the situations. They can provide psychosocial and mental health care. They can manage cases and make sure people get access to assistive devices, for example, if it's a person with a disability. And lastly, social workers can and must always, I believe, push for justice and inclusion and peace. We have these responsibilities.
Yep, you're absolutely right, Steve. And it's going to be a lifelong and generational endeavor. Now, here's a question from Myanmar, from Phone Win, and it's for Dr. Cynthia. What will be safe and effective ways of coordination between humanitarian development actors from, it's in quotations, liberated areas under EAO controlled areas, and those actors working in areas under the SAC controlled areas? And perhaps Dr. Cynthia, you can also tell us what EAO and SAC mean.
Yes, firstly, EAO mean like ethnic organization, because as you may aware that Burma has been under conflicts for over 6 decades, and most of the ethnic group who are living on the border, they control the territory and they have their own armed forces and administrative system. So under the ethnic control area, the ethnic health organization has been established as a health institution. So different ethnic health organizations have their own the training for their health workers and forming the structure that need to be relevant to the local context, like some of the service delivery through mobile clinic or some service delivery through fixed clinic, as well as train the local ethnic health worker and continue capacity building for the ethnic health workers. So under the SAC means the military regime, which take over the coup in February, we call State Administrative Council. So now we are State Administrative Council. They are taking over the democratic government. And then currently the ethnic health organization, the health worker who are working under the ethnic health organization, and the health worker who are joining the CDM called Civil Disobedience Movement. So working together to learn from each other, because before the military coup, there has been not much connection between the ethnic ethnic health workers and the government health workers. So in 2010, when the Burmese government have the election, the first election, there is a system being built to start working together between the Ministry of Health and Sport and Ethnic Health Organization. But the reality is Burma is under the central command and the centralized system. So the ethnic health infrastructure or organization are not recognized, and then they are considered as a volunteer in the community. So that means the understanding between the ethnic nationality structure and the central government is there is a gap. So during this time, after the military coup, the understanding or learning between the ethnic health workers and the former government service, we've been working together on to provide services as well as to train, to continue train or to try to mobilize the service, mobilize the resources from different resources. So by working together on the same cause, through the healthcare system, people are aware that the accessibility of the health services or efficiency or effective way of providing service need to be empowered in different level of the community member. So through this way, in the elaborated area called like ethnic organization control area and state administrative council area, there has been continued connection. So the health workers themselves are the first group who fight against the military regime. So by working together with the same cause, especially for reducing maternal death or providing COVID-19 like vaccination and forming the COVID task force, there has been ongoing meeting and consultation and then dialogue between the ethnic health workers and the government, the former government staff. So then make all the organization to become empowered. So strengthening partnership and networking is one of the key area we need to continue promote. And then many young people are also learning how the health professional being support and working together in different contexts.
It's good to know that you have found a way to communicate and to collaborate on this very important issue of preserving health. Now, Steve, this question is follows from the impassioned point made by Dale. The IDPs you serve must be as diverse as the communities they come from: Christian, Muslim, indigenous people, Rohingya, Arakan, etc. What challenges have you found most difficult to navigate in providing these services to people who may not see eye to eye at the best of times? And this is from Margaret Llamas of the Christian Life Community Philippines.
Thank you, Margaret, for the question. I think the most difficult situation we have encountered thus far are the people who are not allowed to be citizens in the country in which they have been born and raised and their father or mother were born and raised. In other words, stateless people, people who, because of their ethnicity and or their religion, are considered to be less than those of a different ethnicity or religion in their country. It's difficult because they absorb a message that they are somehow less, and we don't agree with that message, and we don't want them to continue to believe they are less. They are in fact equal to anyone else. Second, it's difficult because they wish to go to school like some of us have. They might like to travel to a different part of their country. They might need access to medical services. They might want to go to university, and they cannot. They're not allowed to do that. I think the third thing that makes it difficult is if we really want to change that situation, it means we're hammering day after day after day after day with those in authority. And we don't mind doing that, but it can have a negative impact on the community itself. And so therefore you have to engage and talk and try to find a way and try to move a little bit forward always being mindful that you could in fact be doing harm at the same time.
Thanks, Steve. Now, this next question, I think, is for all three of you. Democracy requires people to be empowered. But how is this possible in a country where poor people, marginalized people, have a big role in the preservation of political positions of some, if not most, of the politicians? So, Steve?
I appreciate the question. I'm worried about the premise. I think the premise is that poor people elect and keep in power authoritarians and all sorts of bad guys. They may be a larger number than the non-poor, but they are enabled, if I can use that language, they are enabled by those who have resources, who have wealth, who have the ability to get messages out and shape the mind and shape the voters and even pay off the voters. So I don't subscribe to the view that it is the poor who are responsible for the election of authoritarians. I subscribe to the view it's those with resources, those with power who make that happen.
Ayi, what do you think? Ayi, you're muted.
Sorry, Amina. I would like to put into context that this question is a very important one, especially in the context now of our country, no? Where we'll have a national elections this coming May. No? And I observed, Amina, that this question is very important because in the public debates, those who want to get elected only talks about programs, only talks about their promises. But nobody is talking about the essence and the foundation of the power being lent to the politicians. See, yung power or the kapangyarihan, it's not owned by the politicians. Pinapahiram lang yan. It's just being lent to politicians. And if this is not going to be deeply imbibed in the politicians and to the electorate, then that premise becomes very strong. That is why the key role of civil society and of new politicians is to get back to the roots of what is the meaning of politics and power. And that's the way to educate people so that people, the electorate, will be able to make the elected ones accountable. Accountability cannot just be dictated. It should be deeply imbibed by the one who wants to get elected and by the ones who are trying to put that person into power. So it's a symbiosis, but again, there's a lot of opportunity to work along the side. And I'm very worried because it's not coming out in the public debates.
Dr. Mao?
Yes. In the case of Burma context, what we have learned over the past years is the forming the strong human rights institution in the grassroots level.
Mm-hmm.
Under the military dictatorship, the civil society group has been oppressed. And over the past 10 years, there is more space for women, youth, and labor union. So they have been forming or educating people, and then documentation system improve, and monitoring all the government project is documented very well. So networking and advocacy also strengthened. So the civil society empowerment and building the strong institution for human rights group is very important to make accountable for the government.
That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. That sounds very encouraging. We're very hopeful if that trend continues. Now, Steve, this is from Carlos Cavanillas of the Spanish Cooperation. He says, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I am moved to see the CFSI work we support in Mindanao camps. It reinforces my idea of the importance to facilitate access to education for the adult population and how it influences on increasing their self-esteem, which is a basic aspect that must be worked to motivate them to achieve more improvements for the community and for themselves. My question, in any case related to the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus, an approach that we can all understand and support for post-conflict zones, but that we are still hardly capable to concretize in the field. I would like Steve to give us some examples to know how CFSI applies this approach, for example, in Mindanao, and the difficulties he finds to do so.
Thank you, Carlos, for that question, and thank you to the government of Spain and ACID in particular for the support. For the benefit of the listeners, ACID, or the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, provided us with funding to work with partners to create in each of the 6 camps of the MILF a community learning center where adults could learn to read and write. Largely women, but also transitioning combatants. And these community learning centers were featured in the film. They include 2 classrooms and toilets and hand washing station, but they also include an innovation, and that is a small room for nursing mothers. And many of the women who talk to us have been so appreciative of that room because it recognizes that women, particularly nursing mothers, have needs, and those needs must be addressed, but it has to be, they need to be addressed in a way that the women can continue to participate in the learning. And this is a major innovation for which they're most grateful. To go to the question, I think that working in communities affected by armed conflict, which are often in the geographically isolated areas, entails a lot of time and trust building. It requires delivering on any promise you've made. It requires working with a great number of people. It requires an understanding that some days you may move forward 1 step and the next day move back 2 or 3 steps. So you don't want to give up. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you are responding collectively to felt needs. If you're coming in and imposing something that the people don't need, then they will not contribute, they will not own it, they will not take it forward. If, on the other hand, you are responding to a felt and expressed need from the community, they will move heaven and earth to make it happen and to sustain that particular intervention.
Thanks, Steve. There's a question here from an anonymous attendee, and I think you and I can respond to this. In a sociological, anthropological perspective, has your institution made any steps to reach out to reforming or educating CPP, NPA in the Philippines? Shall we start with Ayi? Because Balay has done a lot of that, right?
Difficult question, Amina. Maybe Steve can first do it.
It's not such a difficult question, but it's a little bit of a dangerous question to
Yes,
answer at this
it
point in
is.
time. So I think the short answer would be yes, but the details maybe not in this particular meeting. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. Too sensitive to be discussed publicly.
Yes.
Sorry.
But there is a note here, and I don't know if Chiclet and Susan are aware of this. It says, Tina Pavia would like to answer this question live. Maybe we can just type in the answers, right? Yeah. Because we have about 5 minutes left in our question and answer forum. This has really been a packed discussion. Here's a question from Agi of Siena College, Quezon City. The first is very specific to CFSI. Do you provide legal assistance to refugees in securing their identity in the host country? And the second can be answered by Dr. Cynthia as well. How do you tame the governments you are dealing with for a smooth flow of your projects? Steve?
On the first question, absolutely yes. We help refugees in the Philippines, for example, get their legal documents. We help them with medical assistance when necessary. In some cases, we're able to provide emergency financial assistance. We help them get into schools. For those who are LGBTQI and or those who are HIV positive, we are able to reach out and engage them with and link them up with some other stakeholders that can be very helpful. And for those who wish to become citizens of the Philippines, to be naturalized in the Philippines, we work with them through that very long process. And I'm happy to say some have become naturalized citizens of the Philippines.
Thanks, Steve. Dr. Cynthia?
Yes. Our clinic now, which is based in Thailand site, as we have been living there for 30 years, we have planned that the Thailand government can tolerate some of the services or program we have been doing. As you may all aware that we share very long border between Thailand and Myanmar, more than 2,000 kilometers. So over the past 30, 40 years, many refugees and the migrant workers and undocumented people who displaced from their home and they moving back and forth. And some of the refugees who are living in the camp, and some of those are become mobile population. And then they doing different jobs and they have different relationship, depend on their language, and then depend on their accessibility of the public services. So this population, they are not entitled to access health services because of their legal documents or undocumented children. So there are many Burmese or ethnic civil society formed to work together with the government. So these volunteer and the community volunteers and the health professionals are not recognized officially as a health provider, but refugees were taken care by different NGO, and most of the health workers are trained and receive training for social work, healthcare, and the teachers as a migrant learning center teachers. So the Thailand government supported the organization who are working with those people. Otherwise, these people cannot be reached out by the Thailand government. So by working together with the government sector and together with the local community leaders, we can continue operate like school health program or vaccination program, and the setting up child psychosocial services and like women abuse, like referral assistance for women who require emergency obstetric or gender-based violence. So this happening in Thailand, and we also build the cross-border network because the many ethnic health workers who will train in Thai side, they can return home to Myanmar side. And then the service depend on the service availability. Some of the referral network and supply chain management has been ongoing dialogue with the local community leaders on both sides of the border. So even though there is no official, there is very few official crossing point between Thailand and Myanmar. There are many natural routes that the ethnic health workers can play a role to continue provide service for the most vulnerable population.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Now we have just enough time for one question. And this is from Dindo Bugarin, who is a grade school CLE teacher in Xavier School, San Juan City. He says, given the context of our students, it is very hard for us to really show what is happening in an armed conflict area like the Philippines and around the world. Sometimes we just show them videos from YouTube and true stories from Google. How else can we open the eyes of our students to extend their sympathy and empathy to these affected people? Steve?
Great question and great heart behind the question. I think because of the pandemic, all of us are now using Zoom day and night.
Yep.
Zoomed beyond our highest desire, probably. But what that means in a practical way is if that school would like to talk to some of the people in Mindanao, we can arrange that. You heard them in the film this afternoon, but we can arrange that. And that type of dialogue allows people to learn from one another. It allows people to grow together as one. We'd be happy to help with that.
Oh, that sounds so wonderful. Ayi?
Yeah, if I may add, and if that's the case, make sure that in that event, all the players and stakeholders would be there, no?
Yeah.
Don't just listen to one side. So if you have MILF on the other side, you can invite armed forces on the other side, and you can do NGOs there and the church. So it becomes a one whole package of understanding, not just one-sided or just one perspective being shared in the group. But just like Steve, I would be extremely happy to bridge this kind of conversations given the limited space and time by this pandemic.
That's wonderful, Ayi. Dr. Cynthia.
So we have also students coming from different part of the world, like medical students who would like to learn about the border situation. And the border is very unique because as mobile displaced population and the conflicts going on in Myanmar, medical students and doctors who come and do the volunteer work on the border in the refugee camps or outside the camp, they also have opportunity to learn and to contribute, not only come in and work or volunteer, also they have learned a lot about the refugee health and the conflicts, as well as opportunity to continue like connecting with the university and the school in other part of the country. And at the same time, the student who study in the Migrant Learning Center, they were born in Thailand and they grow up in in migrant community, but they also have opportunity to continue learn from each other through our health worker training or teachers training. So the training institution are also very effective way of integrating or cooperating the student from different part of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Wow, it has really been a very stimulating discussion. I wish we could have done it face to face, then we could have coffee on the side and talk to Steve and talk to Ayi and talk to Dr. Cynthia. But still, I think everybody has been so engaged. So thank you, everyone, for throwing in your thought-provoking questions. Now, let me just give you some of my takeaways from today's discussion. It's very clear that our speakers agree, and I 100% agree, that no change can be imposed. It is very clear that a community must be the one to change itself. It must reform itself. It must accept democracy. It must accept peace. And that can only be done if we empower the actors from within, which CFSI is doing, Balay Mindanao is doing, Dr. Cynthia is doing as well. But above and beyond, I think we should take home the lessons learned that have been given by Steve, which I absolutely love. Lesson number 1 is that there is no I, right, Steve? There is we. The second one, which Ayi says he has to learn, listen, listen, listen. I have to learn that as well. And lesson number 3, learn, and then learn some more. I think all of us, if we did nothing but implement those lessons learned, I think we will see that we will be on a very straight and smooth path towards peace and development, towards unity, respect for rights, respect for everyone, for dialogue, and we'll be able to have coffee with each other, whether you're from Myanmar, whether you're from Lanao, and have a great time. So thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Muncy, Ayi, where's Ayi? He disappeared. Ayi Hernandez,
I'm here.
Dr. Cynthia Maung, and all the wonderful people who have brought in their questions for today's discussion. Maraming salamat po. Salam to everyone. And now, let us listen to some of Steve's friends. Steve will be the first to attest that the success of his life's work would not be possible without the invaluable contributions of his partners and supporters who share his dream of world peace. So we have requested, Ramon Magsaysay Awards Foundation has requested a few of Steve's partners who have taken part in some of CFSI's missions to share some of his experiences working with our Ramon Magsaysay awardee. The first to give his message is Australian Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Stephen Robinson. Because of his very busy schedule, he was kind enough to send us a recorded message. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Stephen Robinson.
Good afternoon to all the speakers and participants of this awardee lecture series organised by the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation. I'm honoured to be part of this session on rebuilding lives, partnerships for humanity, development and peace, and to discuss Australia's strategic partnership with Community and Family Services International, or CFSI. As we are all aware, the Philippines is one of the countries most affected by natural disasters, experiencing an average of 20 typhoons a year, and is also vulnerable to geological hazards such as earthquakes, volcanoes and tsunamis. Aside from disasters, decades of conflict in Mindanao have resulted in protracted displacement, which affects the social and economic development of communities. Australia recognises the importance of recovery assistance to support the transition of the displaced population from humanitarian relief to long-term recovery, peace building and development. Since 2004, we have been working with CFSI in providing livelihood, protection, psychosocial support and basic socio-economic infrastructure to vulnerable families displaced by disasters and conflict. Our partnership allowed us to provide assistance to internally displaced persons in the Mindanao conflict, the 2013 Zamboanga Basilan crisis and the 2017 Marawi siege. We also responded together in various natural disasters such as the 2006 Southern Leyte landslide, Tropical Storm Wasi in 2011, Typhoon Bofa in 2012 and Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Through our partnership, CFSI facilitated psychosocial care, protection, shelter and livelihood support to more than 200,000 people affected by and displaced by these disasters and conflict, which helped them get back on their feet and rebuild their lives and their livelihoods. True to their mission, CFSI protects and promotes human security and ensures that no one is left behind by including support to the most vulnerable groups, such as women and children, people with special needs, and persons with disabilities. Relevant to today's topic on partnerships for humanity, development and peace, CFSI has established partnerships across the country and works in coordination with local government units and local organisations to ensure complementary support for the affected population. These local partnerships resulted in enhancing the capacity of local government units through training on disaster preparedness, protection and psychosocial support. In early 2020, Australia launched Partnerships for Recovery program to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by pivoting our assistance to the areas of health security, maintaining stability and economic recovery. As part of this initiative, we launched a new program in January with CFSI called the Marawi COVID Recovery Project, which is supporting 4,000 families restart lost livelihoods and recover from the impact of 3 major shocks: armed conflict, protracted displacement and COVID-19, through protection and psychosocial services. I'm also pleased to share that this year we celebrate 75 years of our diplomatic relations with the Philippines, with a theme on mateship and bayanihan. Our partnership with CFSI is a great testimony to this mateship and bayanihan as we continue our work for the most vulnerable sectors of society. Rest assured that Australia continues to stand by the Philippines and the Filipino people in times of need, and will continue to be an advocate of partnerships for humanity, development and peace. Thank you very much, and good afternoon everyone. Mabuhay.
Thank you, Ambassador Robinson. Now let us welcome the Norwegian Ambassador to Singapore, His Excellency Eivind Holme.
Let's just a second there. Hey, you see me?
Yes.
Very good. And distinguished speakers, organizers and participants, thank you so much for your kind invitation to join today's program organized by the highly respected Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation. I really appreciate this opportunity to reconnect, to learn about the collective efforts of Dr. Stephen Muncy and CFSI. It's been very interesting, and I must also say very encouraging. Allow me to go back in time, because I arrived first time in Manila on the very day former President Marcos had to leave the presidential palace and his country. I was a very young diplomat arriving on my first posting. I experienced a land and a culture so different from my own, having grown up in Norway. But I also met some warm and friendly people, and I left with so many good memories from my time in the Philippines. Since that time, I served as a Deputy Chief of Mission in China, Ambassador to Indonesia, Timor-Leste, ASEAN, India, Bhutan, and currently in Singapore. Throughout this journey, I've had the privilege of meeting many people. Some truly stand out, and among them is Stephen Muncy. When I met Stephen over 25 years ago, my Vice Ambassador in Manila at that time, Knut Mørkve, and I were very impressed by Stephen. We were impressed with his ideas, precisions, and dedication in helping the Indo-Chinese refugees from the Vietnam War. And quite often, they were rescued at the sea by Norwegian merchant ships. Stephen saw they needed more than shelter and food. They also needed help to mend mental scars and somebody who really sincerely cared for their well-being. CMHA was born, and Norway was among those who provided some financial support, and the Norwegian embassy served on its board. The collective observation was that Stephen was someone to trust 110%. He was always well prepared and delivered as promised. And I would say much more than that, he stood out as an exceptional, warm and caring person. I regularly visit the Refugee Processing Center in Batam. I return with glimpses of suffering and despair, but most of all, hopes for a better life. I was impressed with the way Stephen interacted with people. and the way they reacted to him. His ability to listen, and that's what we talked about today, his ability to listen and to see people. This has always stayed with me and served as an inspiration for me. Stephen is not a man of big words, but with his sincerity and compassion, you know that he has a mission in life and that he will succeed. And also listening today, with his wisdom, with experience, he can make a big difference also with regard to serving the mission of peace. I know now that the refugees that left Batam for Norway did very well in their new country. And in this regard, you and your team, Stephen, had a positive impact for so many people. CMSH grew into CFSI before I left Manila. It was a very wise choice. And in decades since, the organization have had an impressive expansion of its work scope in the Philippines and in the region that we heard much more about today. Impressive results that demands hard work. It requires the collective efforts, the we, but also with a good leader at the helm to navigate and to inspire. I'm very, very happy to congratulate you with the prestigious Magsaysay Award, Stephen. Today, I salute your contributions to humankind for over 40 years. You are a good man, Steve, and your life works have made a difference for many. I'm proud to call you my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Now, on behalf of the Swiss Ambassador to the Philippines, let us welcome Deputy Head of Mission, Mr. Tim First, a short message.
Yes, thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Ambassador Alagashan, I would like to express the appreciation of the Embassy of Switzerland and also of Switzerland as a country to the achievements at the life work of Dr. Muncy. Our embassy had the privilege of working together with Dr. Muncy and CFSI in the context of several projects in the past year. Our cooperation with CFSI focused mainly on the Bangsamoro region here in the Philippines, where we supported various projects. There were projects to provide education for children formerly disengaged from the MILF, projects to train social workers, and projects to improve the public health structures here in the region. As an embassy, we have been impressed by the professionalism, the commitment, and the achievements of CFSI. But in addition to this, we also highly appreciated the personal contacts this embassy had with Dr. Muncy. He is the very best example of a humanitarian and of a person committed just to make the world a better place. So in this regard, I would like to congratulate Dr. Muncy again, not only for receiving this award, but also for his lifetime achievements, not only here in the Philippines, but in the whole region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. First. Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me, Susan, and the Ramon Magsaysay Awards Foundation. Now over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Amina. This was an incredible afternoon. I want you all to know that we have an audience of about 900 plus people on Zoom and on Facebook. And the countries that have been, well, that are being represented this afternoon are not only from the Philippines, but we have our brothers and sisters from Myanmar, from Vietnam, from India, from the Netherlands, from Singapore, and Thailand that are joining us. So thank you all so much from the bottom of our hearts for your support and your wanting to engage and dialogue with the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation. Of course, special thanks to you, Amina, for the wonderful moderation and this, and the synthesis that you did. To Cynthia Mong, thank you. To Ai Hernandez, I can't wait to meet you in person as well. And of course, to our esteemed ambassador home from Norway that is live and spoke to us this afternoon. To of course Tim First from the Embassy of Switzerland. Thank you so much, Tim. And of course for the pre-recorded message as well of Ambassador Robinson from Australia. Thank you so much. it takes a village to create this kind of a lecture series. So, of course, our main lecturer, Steve, you have just inspired all of us to continue to be involved in the work that you do. Many of us sometimes forget. We are just so focused on the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis that we do forget that there are so many people that are remaining stateless, that are refugees. In today's day and age, I can't believe we even have refugees, and yet we do. And the state of Myanmar right now that we cannot forget. And of course, closer to home, our brothers and sisters in Marawi and in Mindanao. And so, we have to keep going. But aside from thanking you, of course, in CFSI, I have to thank most especially JR and Oscar, who I know have been working feverishly behind the scenes, putting this together. Okay. And so JR and Oscar, thank you. And of course, my Ramon Magsaysay team behind the scenes, because as you know, there's a village behind me that puts this together. So to the RMTLI group, that's the Transformative Leadership Program, with Chiclet and Tina, and of course, the whole team, Victor, who is, being put in one division to another, and all the other people that we have, but most especially, Poch Suarez, who is in charge of this, this particular lecture, Helen Sadol, and of course, Nino, for making sure that our technical things do not blow up. I just wanted to thank them because there's really an entire Ramon Magsaysay team behind me to produce such things. So again, thank you all, and to our, of course, Board of Trustees, Emily Abrera, who is there, Gigi Montinola, Shell Habito, and of course the rest of them who give us their support. We are so, so grateful. Thank you. So for those of you that want to continue to engage with us, please visit our website, www.rmaward.asia, and you can continue to be with us in all of our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter, and we are being live streamed on YouTube. So again, thank you. I want to personally invite all of you. We have Bravo Asia. Bravo Asia is November 28 and 29, celebrating the arts in Asia. We have people from Japan showing the Kurosawa film, okay, with English subtitles. We have Lee Wai Min from Taiwan showing us choreography and dance. And then we have, of course, Mr. Krishna as well from India, showing us the beauty of Carnatic music, aside from, of course, the Philippine pride, Ryan Kayabyab. Help me out here, my team, Mr. Bien Lumbera as well. And of course, I know I'm missing, Nick Joaquin. We also have Nick Joaquin. So please, it's all on Zoom. This is all free. Let's enjoy, the arts and culture of Asia. And then on November 30 is our big awarding ceremony that you're also all invited to join. And the way to find out more about it is if you follow us on Facebook or on LinkedIn or Twitter. Okay? So again, thank you all so much from the bottom of our hearts. Poch, take it away.
To know more about Stephen Muncy and CFSI, please visit their website at www.cfsi.ph. The webinar evaluation form will be posted in the chat box and live stream comment section after this event. Please note that certificates for our attendees will only be sent to participants who have answered the online evaluation form. The Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation has a lot more in store for everyone this November. The next lecture will be next Wednesday. It will be by Dr. Firdousi Quadri on November 24, 2021. And also, please join us for our very special event on November 30. This will be the 2021 presentation ceremonies. To be updated with all our activities, we invite everyone to follow the Ramon Magsaysay Award on various social media platforms. Thank you very much for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ma'am Amina, thank you. Dr. Maong, Sir Ayi, and of course, Stephen. What a great conversation we had this afternoon. Thank you so much.
And Miss Narcisa Escaler, former ambassador of the Philippines to the United Nations, is also with us.
Wow.
CFSI's BOT chair. Hello, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. That's Ching? My gosh.
Hi, Ching.
I have you as Narcisa, Ching. Hello. Thank you for joining us.